millions able to refresh the screen and see me talking again. And I'm watching. My drop frames went down to 84.4. It's just fucking killing. Anyways, so Russia's doing an imperialism. What the ever loving fuck? Yeah, my I got a message that said my OBS had to reconnect, so I'm assuming it. You're getting a fucking ad running and interrupting me? Okay, yeah. 18 fucking seconds of Old Navy. Well, I'm gonna hold off for 18 seconds. Yeah, well, this is the problem with me being an affiliate. When when OBS behind the scenes was like, oh shit, I've got to drop and reconnect, Twitch sees this as a new stream and therefore feels the need to pump in another ad. I don't know if I'm going to stay with the affiliate program, honestly, because like I'm not interested in getting people's money. And it kind of, I feel like if you're an affiliate, it may draw more views, and that's kind of what I'm unsure about and why I've continued with it. But like, I'm pretty sure I don't get any money from these ads they play, which again, if I got money from it, I'd probably just donate it to the Bear Clan. Yeah, political stances and beliefs don't make Putin's war gooder. Totally. He's doing an imperialism. And when you don't embrace that reality and you go, well, no, he's just liberating the people from fascism, exit stage left, stage right even, then you're missing the point. And when you claim that NATO's doing an imperialism by saying, hey, let's not allow an invasion, or let's, they're not even like actively at war, but they're supporting the war effort of the Ukrainian people who are not a part of NATO. This to me isn't imperialism. This is like, we got a buddy who needs a hand, and we're giving him a hand, but we're staying as far out of it as we really can. Political affiliation to left or right hasn't stopped anyone from starting a war. Human beings are fucked animals at times. Yeah, I totally agree. And the left is just as bloody as the right. History has shown that there is no morally superior position. That's not true. It's morally superior to be a progressive person and to not be like, hey, you know what? Death camps might be cool. That would be an example of moral superiority. I'm willing to go out on that limb. So yeah, I do support NATO doing its best to help Ukraine fend off an invasion by a foreign power that is, in my opinion, a fascist foreign power, intent on obfuscating why they're doing this to land. Define progressive. To me, progressive is... that's a good question. How do I define progressive? Progressive is moving forward, progress. A progressive standpoint should always be to move towards a more morally positive society. So I would say, for example, that abortion is a progressive step because the net positive of abortion is good. Not that baby murder good, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the necessity for human beings to have access to the ability to not be pregnant anymore. That's a good thing, because babies who are born in this scenario where they are unwanted often have really shitty outcomes. More humans taking up more resources in an extincting species. If it's not a political stance, it's a fact of our biology. Progress is like morality. It's relative, not absolute. I agree with both of those statements, absolutely. There is no absolutely, correct form of progress. But again, this goes back to that weird conversation I once had in a shower with a fella who told me that different isn't always better, but better is always different. And that's what we should be striving towards. As a society, we should be looking at our existing systems and saying, how can we improve these? And that is being progressive. Now, we won't always hit the ball out of the park. Sometimes we will fuck right up. I guarantee you the people who were behind the 60s scoop and, or sweep, whatever it is, and the birth alert system thought that they were being progressive, but they were wrong. Abortion gives control of a woman's body to the woman, who would argue control over your body is a bad thing. American conservatives, Canadian conservatives, a lot of people are arguing that shit. Because Jesus. They argue for the fetus and ignore the actual argument. And the reverse. I support choice and women control over their own body. Anything less is slavery. Totally agree. I had this conversation last time I streamed. Someone popped into my chat and was like trying to goad me into making an absolute stance on when it was okay and when it was not okay to abort a baby. And their intent was to prove to me that the moment of conception, that becomes an immoral act. And it was an interesting conversation, and I quite enjoyed it. But also, I was right and they were wrong. I'm personally okay with, like, you know, when people go, well, you know, so you think that a woman at like 8.99999 months pregnant should be allowed to have an abortion? That doesn't happen. Without having like legitimate medical cause, that doesn't happen. But if it did, I would support it, only because it's an edge case. It's a ridiculous edge case that is not a real thing. But okay, let's pretend it is. The value of access to abortion is more important than the nuances of when is it okay. I wouldn't consider it morally okay, but I would also consider it like, okay, fine. But the net benefit of access to abortion is more important than this one edge case. So yeah, anyways, Kev comes with that. So I replied, you're neat. I'll send over my official communism resume so you can call my references. Red. Yeah, straw man arguments are popular with right-wing fucktards. Not only that, but I would say that right-wing fucktards are also exceptionally good at missing the point. You know, when called on things, they often fail really miserably. Like, for example, the idea of a child who is pregnant with a rapist's baby. And you go, what about this? Because this is also an edge case. A much more realistic edge case than the 9-month pregnant woman having an abortion. And they go, well, you know, God has a plan for everything. And you go, really? God's plan is rape? God's plan is pretty fucking garbage then, isn't he? He's kind of a monster. Straw dog arguments. Apologies to straw man. They don't miss the point. They hijack the points and ignore the ones they don't want to talk with. Yes, absolutely. This is very true. Tankies do the same thing, which is another reason why I suspect that they're all just little fascies. So Kev replies, honestly, using that reply, it looks like you feel your communist game is not too strong. Well, it's not, because I'm not a communist. What he means is that I'm clearly cowering in fear because I don't want to engage with him because he's morally right and I'm a CIA operative and I don't know the works of Marx and Engels and Trotsky. And I'm more than prepared to say I don't. I think I read Das Kapital when I was a kid. Okay. But I'm by no means a scholar on communism. That's not what makes me a socialist. In fact, communism would be the thing that leads me away from socialism, because communism is pretty shit. When it's been implemented, it has not gone well. And the people who are talking in these conversations, the tankies, think that it worked real good, think that there was real strong benefit to communism as implemented in places like Russia and China. I disagree. And if that was, I would not be a socialist. So I reply, I'm not real enough either. It's cool. The left is utterly homogenous, and Father Haas gave you the left sight to know the CIA plants from the really real ones. Anyone who disagrees with Infant Red is lies. Because I was trying to blow him off at that point. And then I replied, I said socialist, not communist. They're not the same, and neither are we. I think it's fascinating how they put themselves up as the ego-driven bullshit artist's narcissist. Very true. And they believe that the more Marx and Engels and Trotsky and stuff, the more they read and the more they really get, aware of the realities of those incredible works, the more commie they are, the better they are as people. When in fact they're just little regurgitators. A Dewey person could easily outdo me in a conversation where we're debating the benefits of Marx or Engels. Guarantee you. I'm not versed on the others, but like Marx wasn't a good person. Marx was a shithead. They're all human. They're all fucked. I have no desire to hold them up as being, authors of the new Bible. I don't trust anyone to be right all the time because people fucking aren't. That's a deal. So he replies, Big Ugly Jim Celeste. I'm not sure why he said Celeste. I'm going to hope that was an autocorrect error or something, but I'm going to say cuz. We'll assume he was saying cuz. Because you're not a Democrat, you're a democratic socialist. And that's a capitalist, completely different from socialist. Most of you lie like that. However, socialist, the means of production is completely different. And you're not fighting for that. The socialist is anti-imperialist. And you are not if you support NATO. So that's a bit of a word salad. Let's break it down. He's decided that I'm a democratic socialist, which would be Bernie Sanders. And honestly, if I was an American citizen and I had the ability to vote, I would probably be voting for Bernie Sanders over some Marxist-Leninist party person, because Bernie Sanders is someone who is more likely to actually bring about progress than the Marxist-Leninist candidate. These are facts. Probably uncomfortable ones. Sorry about your feelings. That said, I am not a democratic socialist. I don't ultimately believe in the value of democracy. I believe in liberty. I am a libertarian socialist. Democracy is an attempt to impose a kind of liberty in the sense that you have the ability to have your voice heard, and that's important. Communism of democracy. I have radically different views than most of the people who live in my neighborhood, yet we all have the same voice in legislature, in parliament, and all of that stuff. Why? Because we've decided it's untenable to govern based on the will of the people. Instead, we go with the will of a electoral party, and you're supposed to pick the electoral party who most aligns with your perspective. And in reality, what ends up happening is, and he is wrong in saying, and that's a capitalist, completely different from socialist. A democratic socialist is probably someone who embraces that we are in capitalism and we are stuck with capitalism. We need to move towards change. Whereas tankies are just like, let's just fucking roll tanks in and kill everybody that opposes us and bring about the glorious future that Father Carl told us to do. But I am not a capitalist. I don't like capitalism. Capitalism is evil. I'm very happy that this is late-stage capitalism, and hopefully it will crumble and falter, and we can actually start organizing the society around the good of the many, because that's not capitalism. If you read Adam Smith's book is the Wealth of Nations. That is the Wealth of Nations, right? It's been a while. I remember being quite struck by the fact that the Wealth of Nations doesn't really talk, at least my memory of it, doesn't really talk about capitalism. And when I read the book, I was like, well, yeah, because they didn't have multinational corporations. He's looking at a pin factory as the example. Well, Mr. Jim, I must needs bugger off now. Take care, man. You too, I am Canadian, and again, happy birthday. I'm always very happy that you join and add to the chat. It's great to see you, my friend. I hope you're well, and I hope you stay well. And I hope that the death of the Queen hasn't brought a tear to your eye. Anyways, where was I going? shit, I don't remember what point I was on. Anyways, yeah. So capitalism and socialism, very different. Oh yeah. I was talking about Adam Smith. Okay, so he's looking at a pin factory, and he's talking about capitalism concepts from a pin factory perspective. And I was like, well, he wouldn't have had access to like the concept of global multinational corporations and stuff. But he, those existed when Adam Smith wrote. Like, Adam Smith was writing. Oh, fuck, I don't even remember. I'm gonna check on my phone because looking it up right now, my bit rate is so poor, and I'm not on Wi-Fi, so I could probably get an answer quicker and better. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. So Wealth of Nations. 1776. March 9th, 1776. So when was the Hudson's Bay Company? Looking at the window, founded in 1670. So the Hudson's Bay Company existed. And in order for the Hudson's Bay Company to exist, that meant the people had to know about the Hudson's Bay because that was part of it. And the Hudson's Bay would have been Canada, and therefore we were actively doing Canada exploitation at the time. So this was a multinational corporation sucking the soul out of a whole foreign peoples and pulling it in for the massive capitalist benefit of the small group that ran the Hudson's Bay Company, the aristocracy, and the wealthy of England. So it's not that Smith didn't have this. When you think about what he was talking about, it's a very small scale. And it actually does align very nicely with Capital and other books. But obviously, Adam Smith is not a communist. He was a capitalist. They're different systems for sure. At the end of the day, it's a question of who owns the means of production. And I am all for, contrary to what, all for the means of production being owned by the people, the public, the society. I think that is the direction we should be trying to force ourselves to move in. Capitalism is not working. It's not ever going to work. It can't work without some degree of social programming and social all the things. And therefore, the filtration of money out of the hands of the private class and into the hands of the public via the government. If you don't have that, you have the Great Depression. It will work for a while, and then it will fail because it's not a system that can last. Because all of the presuppositions that all of these systems make are wrong. The assumption that capitalism has to make is that there is altruism. There is an invisible hand that guides the economy and makes sure that the people who have less ability and less whether that's capital or physical, mental, whatever abilities, that they are still taken care of. That hand don't exist. Conservative libertarians will tell you they're not doing that. They don't create these foundations to look after people. They may on a small scale, but we have a homeless problem, and no one's fixing it on the right. No one's fixing it on the left either. But at least the left is taking steps. At least there are people who are left-leaning people who are like getting involved in groups like Bear Clan Patrol, for example. So the idea that I am a sock dem is wrong. And the idea that democratic socialists are capitalists also. I'm not fighting for that. The socialist is anti-imperialist. Well, I am anti-imperialist. And you're not if you support NATO. No, this is where we have a problem. NATO is a military or treaty, essentially, between people to keep some kind of balance when faced with the larger enemy at the time of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Now Russia is again doing its imperialism, which fucking killer. Like you can come at me and be like, you support NATO, so therefore you are an imperialist. I support Russia invading a fucking sovereign country. Yeah. So anyways, that was a fun little interaction. I stopped replying because it wasn't worth continuing on. The little troll man would have continued, would have eventually challenged me to a big sweet debate. And don't bother. Dance were designed to be like, yeah, shut up. Just go over there. Just stop. Whatever. It was funny. I enjoyed it. But I love the idea that they are, at the core, those groups are all fascist movements. That is not to say that everybody who supports the convoy or everybody who supports this, that, or the other is a fascist. A lot of them will be liberals, and a lot of them will be centrists, and a lot of them will be regular right-wing people who are not fascists. Essentially, that's what fascism do. It masquerades in many ways. You don't believe me? Well, why is it that most of the times when there's a march by the fascists, it's called a march for free speech? Now, this has been a thing for a lot longer than our recent free speech debacles about Twitter and how big organizations should be forced to let you say the N-word on them, is because it brings out the people who, if they were to go, we're going to march about how much we hate people who are different than us and we want to murder them, it's probably not going to be a very successful march. But if you go, we're going to march for free speech, then the Voltaire liberals are like, oh, free speech, yes. Yes, I support free speech. I may not agree with what you say, but I will die for your right to say it. That's something that's okay by the fascists. They're happy to let... This is not new. This is not even remotely new. And it's not good. It's not a good look. Not a good look, folks. But at the end of the day, this kind of masquerading as other things than fascism is what makes fascism thrive. Fascists know this. They have been... people keep thinking that fascism disappeared after we beat Hitler and therefore no more fascism. Not the case. There have been fascists ever since. And they have been organizing, and they have been working, and they have been discussing, and they have been refining their tactics in ways that we have not. Because we won. We got complacent. So, they went through the Nazi skinhead phase, and then they got into the alt-right phase. And the alt-right phase started when the Nazi skinheads were a thing. Not that Nazi skinheads aren't a thing anymore. It's just much less common than something like the alt-right, where they abandoned some of the core concepts that we associate with fascism. Things like racism. Not all fascists are racists. Fascism requires other. It requires an ideological enemy that you can lock horns with and that you can ultimately overcome. And if you read like Umberto Eco, Eco talks about the need for an enemy who is both strong and weak simultaneously. So, we're a bunch of libtard snowflakes crying in our kibble because, we want our safe spaces and stuff. That is weakness. But at the same time, we are the cultural Marxists intent on destroying the fabric of goodness in the world. And we're doing it. And you have to stand up, or this is the world. Those incredibly weak people will somehow impose on you. It's like a bait and switch, but it doesn't matter because they're okay with the idea that this isn't logically consistent, that the weak people are strong. That doesn't make sense. They don't need it to. They can switch from one stance to the other like that. We don't recognize fascism. I've done videos on this before. The Yellow Vest movement, the Freedom Convoy, United We Roll, these are all Canadian movements that happened in the fairly recent history that were at their core organized by fascists because they recognized that there was individual components that aligned with what they ultimately want, and that they would be able to focus on those components to bring in large support and try to sneak in what they want. So what was the convoy? The convoy was that petition. The petition that said, we demand an end to mandates and that Justin Trudeau and all members of Parliament are stripped of all their power, and we will reconstruct our ruling class to be the Senate, a coalition of the people who showed up for the convoy. Now, if you're not familiar with Canadian politics, the Senate is not elected. We do have elections for Senate. They're hilarious because the Senate is not elected. Senators are appointed. And I think it was Preston Manning and the Reform Party who decided that they were just going to start having elections for senators because it was important that we had that as a democratically elected position. So they would have these, and I'm a senator, and they're like, no, you're not. You haven't been appointed to the Senate. And I don't think any of the people who have ever won that have actually made it into the Senate. It's just political theater. I may be wrong on that. I may be wrong that there are, people who got appointed as a result of these elections. I don't think I am. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that one. In the most recent one, I voted for the former program director of our local college radio station. Because why the fuck not? It was a dumb election, dumb vote. The Senate is appointed. The Governor General is appointed. The Governor General, again, is theoretically the representative of the Queen, who takes no active interest in our politics. So the Governor General is just a needless figurehead. And then we have this group that felt that they could be the third tier of government. Senate, Governor General, creepy group. And creepy group clearly not being elected by the masses. Now, one could argue, if you're saying that democracy is the system that we have, and we've had an election, it was a fairly recent election, and the Liberals won. That means the will of the Canadian people was that. Like it or not, that's what they chose. Instead, we wind up with these people saying, well, that's not right. That's not the will of the people, because it's not my will, and all these people standing with me's will. So we're just going to stop doing the election part, and we'll just the core fascists. They don't have to be racist to be fascists. I think a lot of them are racist. A lot of them talk about Anglo-Saxon bloodlines for very specific reasons. But whether they are believers in the greatness of the white or not does not matter, because evidence of the degeneracy of modern society, he's legit just doing a fascism. And who knows that if he says stuff, he can work on populism, he can get all the people behind him and just ride that power to Gravy Town. At the end of the day, that's who Trump be. He be that fella. And cool. Good on you, Trump. Way to be that guy. It's neat. I don't like that. I'm not a fan of it. If you wanted to go with a populist candidate, we should have gone with Bernie. Bernie's a populist, but he's not a monster. And he's a populist who speaks to all of the people. Right? He's got the chops from his history doing things in support of people of color and poor people and all of the people, and just trying to say, let's make the world better. Trump doesn't want the world better. He just knows how to say words that rile people up and make them go, ooh, this feels like he's talking to me. He seems like a guy I could go for a beer with, which would never happen. Trump would never go for a beer with you or anyone like you, because he doesn't like us. We're not his people. Frankly, I don't even know who his people are. I mean, obviously they're the wealthy, but wealthy people can't take him fucking seriously, right? Like, don't tell me that's a thing that happens. If I was wealthy and I was like, oh, so you eat steak with ketchup on it, you need to get the fuck away from me, you weird. That's how I would be. But his whole speech was like, it was fucking super fashy. He kept talking about China and the China virus because he knows that's going to whip up racists. He kept talking about China and how cool they were, and his good buddy Xi, yeah, in the same fucking breath, and how, he was talking about drugs, and he actually said that he wants to bring in the death penalty for drug dealers. Now, I just want to make sure that's understood, that I'm not, like, this isn't hyperbolic. This isn't me being like, as some crazy leftist going, oh yeah, Trump, he wants to kill all the drug dealers. He literally was like, I call on Congress to enact legislation to bring about the death penalty for drug dealers. That's fucking terrifying. First off, what's a drug dealer? I mean, I would hope the legislation would be clear, but I'm not really sold that that's the way that things will go. In our current society, drug dealer could be pharmacist, could be homeopath. Who knows? But if you just say, like, let's say they get perfect answer, and they came up with, like, a drug dealer who sells Schedule 19.3, drug paraphernalia and drugs and stuff. Like, fine, okay, let's just say they did that. The death penalty? Are we really saying that selling drugs is the kind of irredeemable social offense that results in the necessity for removal permanently from life? That, I don't know, feels a little bit weird. And he's talking like this, and I'm just like, how are people, like, cheering this shit? I get not liking drug dealers. I get it, 100%. Not a big fan of drug dealers. I'm not a big drug guy. I do drugs, I'm not going to lie. But, drug dealers have caused problems. But let's look at the breakdown of drug dealers. Are we really talking about just like this evil consortium of bad people who are trying to destroy society? Probably not. When we're talking about drug dealers, we're mostly talking about poor people, mostly people of color, who are doing what they can to survive in a world that is, through capitalism, entirely hostile to their existence. Not just through capitalism and white supremacy. Hostile to their very existence. And that's not fun. If you're dealing with capitalism and all that other shit, and you have really no options but to do the hustle, to basically are in a place of incredible depression and incredible violence and incredible all kinds of social problems. And you can argue, the way out is through a good education. First off, that's not always true. Second off, raised in an environment like that, it is understandable for people to say, that's not a thing. It's not available to me. So I'm just going to do the thing that is available to me. And what's available to me? I could get a job at the local grocery store, maybe. Or I could be a gangbang. But because not every gas station is hiring, not every opportunity is presented to every single person. And also, you're in a world where maybe that's the sole source of brotherly love that you're encountering. Like, there's a million reasons behind why people, go in that direction. But my point is, these are not villains. They're people that society has forced into villainy, if you even want to consider it villainy. And I personally don't. I would be all for legalizing all drugs. As much as I'm not a fan of people, doing meth and freaking system we've built that leads people towards drugs as a means of self-medicating for the very real pains of the society. Feels a little shitty to be like, hey, you did the thing. I gave you that rational brain and you disbelieved in Jesus, and then now you can't go to heaven. I put you in a system where your only way out appears to be violence, and then you were violent, so we're going to kill you for it. Cool story, bro. I don't feel like that's the morally right thing. Funny that. So, Trump wants to kill those people. It's not that Trump wants to kill those people. He is not actually worried about the state of the world. He keeps talking about, like, he's in Philadelphia at the time. He's like, Philadelphia is dealing with the worst crime wave in Philadelphia history. Total bullshit. I guarantee you there are way worse times in Philadelphia than today. That doesn't mean Philadelphia is doing awesome. But what's the solution? Do you start murdering bad people? Or do you start investing in helping people? In making that society better? In taking away some of the social problems that lead this inequity, that leads to... I think I know where my money would be. Trump's idea, though, is just kill them all and let God sort them out. Because he doesn't fucking care. All that money should stay with Trump. He is, after all, the God King of the world. I find that creepy. I found his whole speech was ugly. It was fascist. And again, I don't think he's a fascist. I just think he's on fascism. But on populism, absolutely. That's his jam. Tell the people what they want to hear. And he's talking about the Keystone Pipeline at one point. This is fucking hilarious to me. As a Canadian who works in the energy industry, let me tell you how the world goes. So, Keystone XL, there is already a Keystone Pipeline. The whole Keystone XL project was to, I believe, double or twin the pipeline. I could be wrong about the particulars. It's not a company that I've ever worked for. That's TransCanada Energy. Not a big fan of TransCanada Energy, honestly. I don't really like pipelines, although I recognize there's a necessity for them right now until we can effectively get off of oil and gas from petrochemicals. We're kind of damned if we do and damned if we don't. It's a bad thing. We should be nationalizing all of these pipelines and all of these energy companies and forcing them to invest those record fucking profits in alternative energy sources and to force them to move away from oil and gas. That would be what I would see. Not just force them to move away from oil and gas and all that kind of stuff, but take some of the revenues from those companies and those record profits they're making in the new energy sector. There's about 1 million things that we should be doing that we're not because we're namby-pambies. But okay, Keystone XL. That pipeline, that idea for the pipeline is not new. You know what? We're gonna do some train just now. God damn, that's slow. All right, so we're just gonna go to the Wikipedia. I know Wikipedia is some kind of evil nonsense garbage. From March 2020, Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin in Alberta to refineries in Illinois and Texas, and also to oil tank farms and an oil pipeline distribution center in Cushing, Oklahoma. TransCanada Keystone Pipeline GP Limited, abbreviated here as Keystone, operates 4 phases. Okay, yeah, blah, 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 blah. 2013, the first 2 phases had capacity to deliver up to 590,000 barrels per day of oil to the Midwest refineries. Phase 3 has capacity to deliver up to 700,000 barrels per day to the Texas refineries. By comparison, production of petroleum in the United States averaged 9.4 million barrels per day in first half 2015, with gross export about, sometimes abbreviated KXL, with XL standing for Export Limited. Pipeline would have connected the Phase 1 pipeline terminals in Hardisty, Alberta, and Steel City, Nebraska, by a shorter route and a larger diameter pipe. It would have run through Baker, Montana, where American-produced light crude oil from the Williston Basin, Bakken Formation, opposition from environmentalists, becoming a symbol of battle over climate change and fossil fuels, which I support. I want to see us get off of this, and maybe part of the process of getting these pipelines built, besides actually engaging with the indigenous communities that you're likely building the fucking pipeline through, would be to have a game plan that says, in order for us to do this much of our revenue is going to get taken away from the corporation and put into these kinds of job retraining programs. This much of the revenue of the corporation that comes from this new phase has to go to investment, viable investment in alternative energy methods. Not just alternative energy, alternative lubes, alternative greases. I talk about these things all the time. We're not going to get away from the need for industrial lubricants. And petrochemicals are currently how we do that. So we need to do better, right? Answering this problem isn't as simple as we use solar, right? Solar is probably a key component, as is wind, as potentially is nuclear, as is a bunch of things for our energy needs. We also can probably look at things like biofuel for creating industrial lubes and greases, these kinds of things. So let's do all of that. Okay. In 2015, KXL was temporarily delayed by President Barack Obama. In 2017, President Donald Trump took action intended to permit the pipeline's completion. I don't remember that happening at all, but I could be wrong. Joe Biden signed an executive order to revoke the permit that was granted to TC Energy Corporation for Phase 4, and we abandoned in June 9th, 2021, abandoned plans for Keystone XL pipeline. Okay, so Trump made comments about how he wanted Keystone XL. No, he fucking didn't. He gave them a permit, absolutely, but there was no sense. Like, Canadians knew this project was not happening. It wasn't happening under Donald Trump. When did Trump's presidency start again? I don't think it was, like, 2017 was later in the Trump presidency. Or am I wrong? Let's find out. We're going to just quickly go Trump presidency. Because I don't me and time don't get along well. Began with his inauguration 2017. Okay, so I'm completely wrong. 2017 was the start of his time in office. But you know what? Fine, he took action intended to permit the pipeline's completion. But there was no work being done on the pipeline because they couldn't do it. Again, I may be wrong on some of the details, but I don't think that there was a genuine investment here. There was an investment by the Alberta government during COVID. They gave like a guaranteed of debts for TransCanada, which was stupid, and resulted in a very big L for the Conservative Party, big L. But we didn't have this happening. This wasn't a thing. Like, Keystone XL was already dead in the water, and every Canadian knew it. And not only that, but in his speech, Trump was like, if only we'd had the beautiful XL pipeline, beautiful pipeline, so beautiful. A lot of people are saying this. If only we'd had that pipeline, we never would have had energy problems ever again, which is bullshit and stupid. But the original planned completion date, I'm sure that it will say that here. Let's see. Phase 4. Does it say? No. There's got to be a thing where it talks timeline. We're loading on the Googles. Timeline of the controversial. This is a CTV news thing, so maybe this will have what we're looking for. CTV is Canadian television, I believe. No, this isn't what we're looking for. When was the pipeline, Keystone Pipeline, supposed to be completed? U.S. importer about 200, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I'm looking for. And it doesn't get done within like 30 minutes of your pizza's free. So the original plan, I think, is here. Yeah, it said it could be built by the first quarter of 2023 if the Biden administration gives the go-ahead. Because again, ain't fuck what's going on during Trump. So Kenny invested a bunch of money thinking that this was a good idea. If Biden had said go ahead, which there was no sign that he ever would, and could have been completed by the first quarter of 2023. So that means not even fucking yet. We would still not have the pipeline. Now, let's talk for a second about what actually transpired there. What was the net result of Trump's talking points? So Trump's talking points were, number one, under Trump's presidency, oil was so free. It was so beautiful. It was the lowest oil has ever been. This is true. Point number two, under Joe Biden, oil is very expensive. Most expensive it's ever been. This is true. But let's look at the details behind that. I've done this on stream before, but I'm fucking doing it again. So, during the time of Donald Trump, what happened? What was going on in the world? Well, let's see. Massive economic collapse, global supply chain problems, I believe Colonial Pipeline. No, the Colonial Pipeline would have been after that. But at any rate, price of oil was problematically low. At least here in Western Canada, in the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, that was selling on the market for negative $5 a barrel. Now, I'm no math magician, but when you're selling a product to cause problems with the global oil prices, and it worked. Also, I think the Chinese yuan filled up before. There's always some oil in reserves. It's the same as with money, where you keep foreign, large amounts of foreign currency, and then you can, release some of it to try and balance out world economic problems. Like all countries do this. All countries presumably have, hopefully by pulling oil out of the market, you're at least having some small effect on increasing the cost, because of course supply demand pulls some supply out, demand remains the same, price goes up. Now, I don't think that there's enough oil in reserve to meaningfully affect the price of oil, especially when the Saudis are flooding the market with it. But it was the wise thing to do. And I don't think that, that's not a pro-Trump statement. Trump's a piece of shit. But that was the right decision in that moment. Biden comes along. The world's a little bit different now. And now all of those things, the supply chain issues and all that stuff, it's for oil companies. Let's not mince words there. They're fucking us. But this is the thing that we're all dealing with, is this incredibly shitty high price of oil. So what did Biden do? The exact opposite of what Trump did. For exactly the same reasons and exactly the same correctness, you get rid of the oil in your reserves to increase the supply. That's the price of oil. Oil is a commodity that is made all over the world, and in capitalism, we always buy the cheapest shit. So when the Saudis open the fucking floods, and they're going to buy it from the Saudis. In a thoughtfully run world, Saudis do that, and we go, yeah, but and not a thing. We don't care about the price of oil. We care about how we set the price of our oil for our consumers. We rely on oil. It's a thing. So both of these things, totally unrelated to the president. Both times the president reacted, different presidents, but they reacted in the appropriate way to do what little was in their power to try and adjust or deal with the situation. Cool. Fine. Down to nothing. Because Trump's just so fucking good. And then they gave the keys to the Bidens, and all of a sudden, oil is $1 jillion a liter. And people can't afford oil anymore. And it's because Biden's an incompetent. No. The price of heating your home. Theory. But along with that, all of the people who work in energy sector jobs are at risk when the market is flooded like that, and when the price of oil is nothing. Is nothing. Because you can't run your business like that. You can't run your energy company like that. You can't run an alternative energy company like that if someone can just go and buy cheap-ass Saudi oil for this issue. And why all of the nations that are being impacted here should be smart enough to say, we're going to stop shipping our oil out, and we're going to use our oil and set our own prices and fuck the world. That would be cool. Again, I'm not actually a fan of nation states. I'm not a fan of borders. I kind of think like we should just, as a society, A, move away from oil, but B, in the interim, stop being dicks about it. Stop fucking each other over oil. That's the anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist perspective. Biden is actively dry humping the corpse of America. And it's gross. The whole speech, it's like 2 hours or 3 hours long. I was going to watch it on stream, but obviously we're having connection joys. And I was going to watch it at 1.75 speed, which is also the exact speed at which Trump becomes like something you can listen to. Because you get through a long ass speech. I was hoping to do that. We're not doing that. Internet, it's a thing. I got kidnapped for my birthday. All right, I'm going to take a pause and go outside and stretch my toes in the grass for about, 5 to 6 minutes, give or take. I will return.